I'm Ashlee. I'm a psychology graduate and I'm currently a program associate under YTL Foundation, and this is Lepas Sekolah.
Ashlee, can you introduce yourself, as in what was your education background and what are you currently doing?
So I studied IGCSE at an international school, and then I continued to an IB Diploma at pre-university, and then I studied psychology at Taylor's University, and right now I am currently working under YTL Foundation.
Coming from an international school, what was the experience like academically and socially?
Actually, I only moved to an international school when I was Form 3. So before that, I was in a government school. And the whole reason why I moved is because my mom, my single mother, really wanted me to study abroad. And so she believed that by studying in an international school and having an international syllabus would kind of increase the chances of me being able to study overseas. And so because of that, I moved to an international school halfway through my high school. And it was quite a culture shock because socially it is very different compared to a government school where you think everyone is only comprised of three races. It's only either Malay, Chinese, or Indian. Whereas once you're in an international school, race and your family background is so different compared to different students. And so because of that, I think you get to explore a lot more because people come from such different backgrounds, and oftentimes they come from different countries, different languages, were raised in a different culture. And so socially, it took quite a while to adjust. But academically, because my school was actually under the IB program, and so what that meant was they heavily focused on the more American syllabus where it was focused on critical thinking and also real world application, which is quite different from the normal Malaysian education where it was more textbook based. And so a lot of my international school was heavily focused on presentation, being able to connect your learnings to real world issues. And yeah, I would say it definitely shaped how I'm able to carry myself confidently in terms of presentations and also social settings.
Some critics often say that international schools are often in their own bubble, right? Do you think that that criticism carries any value?
Well, a lot of the students that go to international schools are definitely come from a more comfortable background. Fees in international schools is definitely expensive here in Malaysia. But I would argue that even though they do come from a comfortable background, what I've been very appreciative of in my international school experience was how the community was able to push me to not only perform well academically but also socially as well. Because I remember when I first joined my international school, coming from a government school, I was so scared to speak in front of a crowd, and I was so scared to talk to my teachers because at the time my government school was very heavily focused on punishment and making sure that everyone was very disciplined, and you are not allowed to speak during classes or speak up about your own opinions. Whereas in international school, there was more of a collaborative environment between the students and the teachers. And so because of that experience, I was so grateful because I was able to become much more confident in expressing my opinions. And you don't need to worry about certain stereotypes or, not being able to get any opportunities because of, your race or your background, because it's a lot about whether you're able to express yourself clearly and if you are able to prove yourself into certain situations, because there's a lot of leadership opportunities as well. The teachers are definitely so welcoming in ensuring that you perform well, not just academically but as a leader as well. And for that, I'm very grateful.
And obviously, after you did your IGCSEs, you went on to do your international baccalaureate. How was that change?
So actually, my international school initially was supposed to do an IB MYP program, which is more aligned to the IB Diploma program, but they changed in my final year to do an IGCSE because it was more internationally recognized certificate. I would say the IGCSE did help me in terms of the syllabus and the the topic content because a lot of the content of the IGCSE aligned with the diploma itself. But I would say if IGCSE, because it's often similar to the SPM syllabus, it is quite different from the IB diploma because the IB is heavily focused on more all-rounded evaluation compared to just memorizing the topics of a textbook. And so it was quite an adjustment as well from IGCSE to IB diploma.
And you took psychology, English literature, and biology. First of all, why those subjects, and how have those subjects shaped your education journey?
So when I graduated from IGCSE, I actually didn't know fully what I wanted to study in university yet. So that's why I chose the IB diploma because it's known to have different subjects and also quite all-rounded. So if you were to apply to different courses, it would still be applicable and accepted to different courses and also different universities. But I chose the topics that I felt that I was most confident in, and then the subjects that I liked the most, which was psychology, English literature, and biology, because I was considering between either studying psychology or studying law. And so those were generally the subjects that I wanted to focus on and see which ones that I thought I would do better in for university.
One reputation that the IB diploma carries is that it is extremely demanding. As you mentioned, that it's all encompassing, right? So there's a lot of things that comes into forming your final grade. Um, do you think that the reputation that it is demanding is deserved?
It's definitely not easy, but at the same time, I don't believe that there is any pre-university program that is easy or not stressful. But I would say because I did the IB diploma during the pandemic as well, because I graduated in 2021. So it was extra hard because we are not just doing exams or coursework, but it was also heavily project and research based. So there was a lot of assignments where you needed to complete independently and needed a lot of your own research as well. So I would say it's quite demanding in terms of the workload. But whether it's manageable or not, I think it depends on the students' capabilities and also strengths. Compared to, for example, A levels may have less subjects, but it's a lot more in depth in terms of the subject content. So I think students really need to think about which program that they would excel better in, whether it's something they need to study in depth or is it you can excel in different areas, not just academically. And what I liked about the IB diploma was that it wasn't just considering how well I was doing academically on paper, but it was also about how well did I do my community service, how well was I performing in my leadership projects. And so because of that, that's why I felt like it was very beneficial for me.
Do you think that the IB diploma prepared you well for university life?
Definitely. I think after graduating from university, I still think that the IB diploma was definitely harder than my actual university degree. But that's also probably because I did it during the pandemic, so it was extra difficult during those times. But even then, all the assignments that I did during my diploma years definitely prepared me for how I can conduct my assignments during my degree. For psychology, there was a lot of research and written reports that you need to do, which aligns with whatever the assignments that I was given during my diploma. But then it also helped me in terms of building my resume because, as I mentioned, the diploma isn't just about how well you do on your grades, but also helping build your extracurriculars and also your leadership roles as well. So it definitely helped me not just in my university life, but also how I can present myself to future employers.
Actually, you went on to study psychology at Taylor's University. Why psychology and why Taylor's?
Mm. So a bit about my passion for psychology. Trigger warning. I actually, in high school, I struggled with actually major depression and also a bit of suicidal ideation. And that time, I think it was still very taboo to speak about mental health outside and openly on social media and everything. And especially as a Muslim, you tend to feel a lot of guilt as well for expressing a lot of negative emotions. And so back then, I didn't feel like I had enough knowledge or knew how to reach out or manage my emotions properly. But as I grew older, I realized that I wasn't the only one experiencing mental health difficulties, and it's actually a lot more common than I thought. Because of that, I became more interested in understanding how mental health actually largely impacts people's performance, and really became inspired through my own experiences in therapy and meeting psychologists. I found a passion in wanting to go into that field and to learn psychology as well. Because I didn't sit for SPM, I wasn't qualified for UPU, so I went through private universities in Malaysia. And because psychology is such a wide subject, you can go into business psychology, you can go into educational psychology. So I wanted to find a university that was more focused on mental health, because that was my area of interest. And so looking at the different universities, I chose Taylor's mostly because I found their subjects to be more aligned with my interest, which is heavily into mental health and also the foundations of the psychology theories that help you become a therapist.
Actually, from your answer earlier, what perhaps I'm able to summarize is that you wanted to study psychology because you wanted to understand people better and perhaps overcome the problems that they have. Do you think that the degree itself lives up to that idea of understanding people and trying to overcome their problems, or was it much more technical and much more research based? How was your experience?
I think a lot of people get into psychology with the expectation that you can immediately understand people just from learning the course. But I think from what I've learned, it's actually the degree itself is only such a small step towards becoming a proper licensed therapist, because you have to go through masters and you have to get registered. And so because of that, the degree is really only laying the foundations of how you can become a person that is capable of understanding different people. So the degree is actually quite technical and research heavy. So a lot of my peers were quite surprised when they had to do a lot of research and write a lot of reports. And we also had to learn a lot of statistical methods as well, like how to conduct experiments accurately. And so because of that, it is a lot more technical than people realize.
Okay, which brings me perfectly to my next question.
Uh-uh.
Just how much statistics, research methods, reading, academic writing is involved in a psychology degree?
For the degree itself, I would say most of it is research and written based. I'm not sure how they do it in other universities, but I can say definitely for Taylor's, a lot of our assignments is more focused on writing. And I would say the statistical methods is quite a small portion, but it's quite an important one, because it is something that you need to use when you do your final year project. So for your final year project, you will need to conduct your own experiment. And a lot of the times for a lot of psychology degrees in university, you would need to apply the statistical methods in order to conduct your experiment. Luckily for my final year project, I actually chose to do a qualitative experiment, meaning you don't need to use statistical methods, but it's more of a qualitative interpretation of people's views, and it's a lot more subjective. So luckily Taylor's allows you to have the option of either conducting statistical methods and quantitative experiments, or qualitative. But yes, statistical methods is still a very important part of the psychology degree.
In your opinion, Ashley, what kind of student would thrive in a psychology degree and what kind would falter?
I would like to believe that psychology is honestly not a very difficult degree, especially compared to law or medicine. I definitely feel like it's quite doable, and it's quite important for a lot of people to learn about psychology, because it definitely helps you communicate with people better and understand other people's perspectives better. But I feel like in terms of studying the degree, I think students who enjoy research and actually reading about different data, learning about human behavior, and also a lot of writing as well. Because a lot of students, they get surprised at how much you need to write for psychology, but it's actually the main part of a psychology degree. So if you like research and writing, I would say students who like that would really thrive in a psychology degree. Students who would struggle, I would say, is the opposite. If you are not someone who enjoys doing research, or writing is not really your strength. Also, if you are someone that is a lot more objective and logical, that's probably not, psychology may be something that you find difficult, because a lot of times, even for our assignments as well, there is no one objective answer. The psychology assignments are always very subjective. It's always very dependent on the theories that you learn and the research that you find. So we don't have a black and white answer for a lot of our tests.
Taylor's University has a reputation for being quite modern and social. Some critics will argue that it is less academically inclined and more for a sophisticated lifestyle, right? Do you think there's any merit in the argument?
From my opinion, a lot of the students that I've met in Taylor's, they kind of follow the work hard, play hard mentality, I think including me as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not academically inclined, because a lot of them, especially from the psychology class, we are definitely quite driven in order to perform well in our assignments. And I think it's because of the lecturers that we get as well. So I wouldn't necessarily discredit Taylor's as not academically inclined. I think it's just that our social life is very colorful. And I think if you go into the Taylor's campus, people are always so fashionable. They dress up so well. So I think that's kind of what you see outside. But I think when you go into the classes and you meet the lecturers and our assignments as well, I think you can see that, we perform just as well academically as we do socially.
What would you say is the most interesting thing you have learned in your degree in psychology that perhaps change how you view society or a person in general?
There's actually so many. When it comes to psychology, you never stop learning. There's always something new to learn. I guess one thing that I've learned is that your most important years of development and developing your brain is actually when you're younger. So your childhood is actually shapes a lot of your personality and a lot of your trauma and fears as you get older. And a lot of adults now, you can relate their behavior to when they were younger, because it's all related to your childhood experience. And so learning about that and learning how the brain develops, I think it made me view people a lot more in a lot more empathetic way, I guess. Because if you see a behavior that you don't like, or if you see red flags or anything, you kind of tend to become curious about their childhood and what experiences have they gone through. A lot of adults or bad behavior doesn't come out just because they are evil or because they have bad intentions. A lot of them just learn this from when they were younger and they cannot change it, and they don't realize it until they grow older. So I think that's one thing that really changed my perspective.
So you've mentioned that studying psychology has made you more empathetic, right? But will you say that perhaps to a certain extent it's also made you more analytical when you meet someone, and or maybe you're more aware of whether a person has any red flags or anything?
I guess more analytical, because I like to believe, I think when you study psychology, I think you realize there is no such thing as red flags lah. Every person is definitely gonna have their own struggles and their own negative patterns, but it's more of whether they are able to work through it and whether they are willing to work through it. So I would say definitely more analytical. But I think because when you study psychology, there is kind of a pressure of wanting to understand people all the time and wanting to be empathetic all the time. Even if the person treats you badly or has bad behavior, you always want to try and understand their perspective. So I think it's just more of when you study psychology, there is the pressure on yourself to treat people better and treat people with more empathy, I would say.
I want to bring it back to what you mentioned earlier about how one of the reasons why you took a degree in psychology is because of mental health, right? And one question that perhaps captures the zeitgeist of our society or our generation is the influence of social media in our lives, right? Do you think that young people are becoming more self aware about mental health issues, or is their mental health getting worse because of the influence that social media has on our life today? It's a difficult question, I think.
Yeah, interesting question. I mean,
Yeah.
very relevant question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I can relate it back to my experience, because when I was going through my mental health issues, there wasn't much talked about on social media. Like I said, coming from an Asian and Muslim community, it was still looked down upon to express any mental health struggles. And when no one is talking about it, and when people talk about it in a more negative light, you tend to feel a lot of guilt, because you're like, oh, I'm the only one that's struggling with this. Why am I the only one that is facing these issues. At that time also, when I was facing trigger warning suicidal ideation, was around the time where suicide is still considered a crime in Malaysia. And so during that time also, I felt like, oh, I can't express these thoughts because I would be considered a criminal. And so there was a lot of fear and guilt on how can I manage these negative emotions properly. So now, fast forward to a few years, now social media has definitely brought up the awareness about different mental health issues. And now also suicide is decriminalized in Malaysia, and I'm very happy for that. Not because suicide should be normalized, but because those who are struggling with those thoughts no longer have to think that it's a crime to feel any mental health difficulties. And I do think, the decriminalization and also the stigma of mental health definitely has improved because there was so much awareness on social media. But I guess now is the question of whether those who are bringing awareness are actually credible to share those information or not. Even though I come from a degree, I finished the degree, I'm still not fully qualified to give any mental health information or advice, because you need to take years in order to get a master's and in order to get licensed to be able to give psychological advice. Having too much information is always better than having a lack of information and awareness. But I guess now it's not the issue of whether people are too self-aware or not, but it's more about how can we educate younger generation so that they know how to differentiate between legitimate advice and just opinions on social media. Actually, an advice from my lecturer when I was studying in uni was, we study psychology not to cure or find solutions to people who are struggling with mental health, but instead we are giving them a platform for them to express their feelings and struggles comfortably in a safe space, and giving them tools to find their own solutions. It's not a one size fits all for mental health, especially it's not like physical health where, if you demam, then that means you might have the flu, or you can ambil this Panadol or specific medication. Mental health, it's more of a spectrum. What is suitable for one person may not be applicable for another situation or another experience. And so when people look for solutions on social media or information, it may not be 100% applicable to them. So I think that's one thing that students should know when it comes to, being exposed to a lot of social media information.
Now, let's talk about YTL scholarship specifically because you're a recipient. How did you find out about it? What made you apply? And what is the YTL scholarship?
I come from quite a difficult financial background. Usually, other parents would kind of save money in order to send their students to a good college, whereas mine, they saved enough money to put me into the international school. So by the time I finished my international school, there wasn't enough money for me to actually continue to university. And so because of that, I actually took a gap year after I graduated from high school, just to save up money and also to apply to scholarships as well for me to continue to university. I actually couldn't find many because for scholarships, especially in Malaysia, I would say a lot of them are heavily catered towards the more STEM subjects. So like business or engineering, those that are more profitable, I guess. Whereas compared to me, because I wanted to study psychology and I was more focused on the mental health space, I definitely did not have a lot of options for scholarships. So I came across YTL Foundation, and they were one of the few scholarships that was also open to social science subjects like psychology. And I saw their past scholars, they gave scholarships to political science and all of that. So I definitely applied to YTL Foundation because I thought that they were able to value my subject and also my course of interest. Yep.
Do you mind talking us through the application process from start to finish?
So I applied to the scholarship online. I had to write a personal statement and also complete the application form. And then after that, I was called into an assessment at their office in Menara YTL Bukit Bintang. And in the assessment, we went through an interview and also a group work activity. And then after that, I was also invited to the final round where I was interviewed by one of the directors on the YTL. From that interview, I think a month later, I got the email saying I got the scholarship.
What made you think your application stood out?
I actually was never a straight A student, so I knew that my academics wasn't really my best strength. And because of that, I heavily focused a lot on my own soft skills and also my extracurricular activities. I used that as an opportunity to express myself more in the personal statement. I think what got me the scholarship, or what gave me an advantage, was that I was able to express myself well in the personal statement, so that they understood that I was not someone not just academically good, but also capable of performing in tasks as well, because it's a bonded scholarship. So they also wanted to see how well would you be as a employee under one of their companies.
During an interview, right? During a scholarship interview, how do you rehearse? I mean, I guess one thing that you don't want to come across is monotonous and robotic, right? So how do you prepare for that?
Because I came from a debating background, so I was quite used to speaking in front of crowds and speaking in front of people. But I actually didn't prepare a full script on what I should say during the interview. It was more of researching about the company itself, what they do and what their values are, and thinking about how my experiences and my values align with the company. Speaking from the perspective of someone working under the scholarships team, there have been students that think that they need to provide the most perfect answers to impress your interviewers. When in reality, a lot of the interviewers just want to understand who you are as a person, because that's what they will remember most. Not just someone who is perfect, but someone who has potential.
Before you joined YTL, you interned for Teach for Malaysia.
Mm.
Why did you choose to intern for an NGO instead of a normal corporate internship?
After I graduated from high school, my family did struggle because a lot of the finances were invested towards my international school. Even though I was so grateful that my mom had the ability to afford an international school, and it is a very privileged level of education. A lot of the things that I value from my international school, such as the environment, the community, the collaborative learning, a lot of that can be cultivated even without spending thousands of ringgit. I think a lot of people who come from public schools tend to believe that, you know, we need more money in order to succeed. We need more money in order for education to be better. And that's what I thought also. When I was so excited to enter international school, I'm like, oh, I put a lot of money into this, so that means it must be so much better. But then in reality, a lot of the things that make a great education is something that can be cultivated without money. And so that's why I joined Teach for Malaysia, because their mission is that all Malaysian students are able to achieve their potential through quality education, because I believe that education can be improved through quality and not just through monetary value. And that's why I heavily admired TFM's mission in bringing that to students from underprivileged communities. And that's why I intern with them.
Now that you're with YTL Foundation and you're working on the scholarship team, where do you see yourself in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, because the YTL Foundation Scholarship is a bonded scholarship, so I have just started working under the YTL Foundation, and I will be serving them for the next 5 to 6 years. But after that, generally, I am looking towards doing my master's, hopefully abroad, because as I mentioned, it's always been my dream to study abroad. So inshallah, I might have the opportunity. But when I started studying psychology, I always was interested in becoming a therapist. So that is my current aim. But then again, it is quite a long journey until then. And I like to believe that every day and every job that I do is meaningful, regardless of how small or how little it relates to my area of interest. And so, because of that, I'm not really trying to fix myself into one specific career plan. I'm quite focused on performing well and creating a more positive impact in the current job that I'm doing. And we'll see, maybe 10 years, I might be in a completely different field. Who knows?
Actually, it's been an absolute pleasure. One last question. Can you describe your journey Lepas Sekolah in 3 words?
Surprising, learning, and also, I guess it's not one word, but surrounded by positivity. Yeah. I'm Ashlee, and this is my journey Lepas Sekolah.